Greetings and durud. Welcome to today's latest edition of Farhang Foundation's Farhang Connect virtual talk series. I am Alireza Ardekani, Executive Director of Farhang Foundation. We are a member-supported, non-political, non-religious, not-for-profit organization with the sole mission to celebrate and promote Iranian art and culture for the benefit of the world. Today, we are extremely honored to welcome longtime Farhang collaborators, the internationally renowned artists Azam and Ramin Loga Torkian, the incredible duo behind the group Niyaz, for today's conversation that will explore the intersection of art and technology. Niyaz is an internationally renowned musical group whose music blends traditional Iranian and Middle Eastern sounds with contemporary electronic elements, creating a unique fusion that transcends borders and cultures. Niyaz has released 4 best-selling and critically acclaimed albums, all of which have debuted at #1 on the iTunes chart and garnered the band an incredible amount of media attention, including features on NPR, PRI, BBC World, Billboard Magazine, The Wall Street Journal, and The Huffington Post. Niyaz continues to tour internationally and build on its impressive and loyal fan base. Their performances have captivated audiences, and their groundbreaking multimedia production, The Fourth Light, has received critical acclaim for its innovation and artistic vision. Farhang Foundation and the UCLA Alpert School of Music are delighted to actually be presenting The Fourth Light for its final world performance for one night only here in Los Angeles on Saturday, August 19 at the prestigious Royce Hall of UCLA. Joining Niyaz in conversation today is Dr. Shahab Paranj. Dr. Paranj is an Iranian composer, instrumentalist, and educator. He is considered one of the pioneers among his generation, whose composition style integrates Iranian and Western composition techniques. Dr. Paranj holds a degree in music composition from the San Francisco Conservatory of Music, the Manhattan School of Music, and UCLA, where he is currently serving as the Postdoctoral Scholar of Iranian Music and oversees Farhang's historic Iranian music degree program at the prestigious UCLA Alpert School of Music. His recent commissions include works for the Russian String Orchestra, the Long Beach Opera, the Intersection Contemporary Music Ensemble, and the Alpert Trio. Dr. Paranj is a founder and artistic director of Du Verre à l'Infini, a contemporary music festival in Franche-Comté region of France, and he currently serves as the music director of the Iranshahr Orchestra of Los Angeles. Now, please join me in giving a warm welcome to Azam Ramin Loga Torkian, who are joining us from their studio here in Los Angeles, and to Dr. Shahab Paranj, who is joining us all the way from France. Welcome. Thank you for joining us this morning. I will now step back and let Shahab John take over.
Thank you so much for that wonderful introduction, as always, Alireza Jun, and bonjour. Shahab Jun, nice to be with you.
Nice to be with you as well. Thank you, Alireza, for the introduction. Hello and welcome everyone to this virtual talk. Thanks to Farhang Foundation for organizing this series of talk. Our topic today is the intersection of art and technology, and we're going to have a discussion with wonderful musicians from Niyaz duo, Azam and Ramin Torkian. Over the past few weeks, I've been listening and educating myself with Niyaz's work, and I'm very happy to have this discussion with them today. Alireza, would you please share the video about their concert on August, so in case anyone is late, so they can join us for this discussion. Okay, thank you. The intersection of art and technology is probably one of the most popular topics in art over the past century. However, since this is a very broad subject and we only have 1 hour probably, we should probably narrow it down to only music. Nevertheless, as our guest journey as a musician involves multimedia, which includes other forms of art, we have a chance to touch upon those and their relation to music. First, I would like to give an introduction and overview about this topic and its relation to the music world. The intersection of music and technology has been fascinating and transformative journey that has significantly impacted how music is created, distributed, consumed, and experienced. Here are some key points about this dynamic relationship. First, music production and recording. Advancement in technology have revolutionized music production and recording processes. From analog recording techniques to digital audio workstation, musicians now have access to powerful tools that enable them to create, edit, and mix more efficiently and creatively. Second, digital instrument and MIDI. For those who doesn't know MIDI stands for Musical Instrument Digital Interface. The development of digital musical instrument and the introduction of MIDI have opened new possibilities for musicians. MIDI allows for seamless communication between different musical devices, enabling musicians to control synthesizers, drum machines, and other instruments from central controller. Third, sampling and synthesis. Technology has enabled the use of sampling and synthesis techniques, allowing musicians to create natural sound and generate entirely new ones. Sample libraries and virtual instruments have become common resources for modern music productions. Fourth, music distribution and streaming. The rise of internet and digital platform has transformed the way music is distributed and accessed. Online music stores and streaming services have made it easier for artists to reach a global audience and for listeners to access vast library of music more convenient. Fifth, music marketing and social media. Social media platform and digital marketing tools have become essential for music promotion. Artists can directly engage with their audiences, share their work, and build a dedicated fan base using platforms like YouTube, Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook. Live performances and technology. Technology has also significantly impacted live music performances, from innovative stage design to advanced audiovisual setups. Musicians use technology to enhance their live show and create memorable experiences for their audiences. AI and music compositions. Artificial intelligence, AI, is making its mark in music composition. AI-powered tools and algorithms can analyze existing music data to generate new composition or assist musicians in their creative process. 8, virtual reality and immersive music. Virtual reality, VR, and augmented reality, AR, technologies have opened up new possibilities for immersive music experiences. And last, copyright and digital rights management. The digital era has brought challenges related to copyright enforcement and digital rights management. Technology like blockchain are being explored to address these issues and ensure fair compensation for artists and creators. Overall, the intersection of music and technology continues to shape the music industry, providing exciting opportunities for musicians and listeners alike. As technology evolves, we can expect even more innovative developments in how music is created, shared, and experienced in the future. before we dive into the conversation, I would like to start with Azam first, how this journey for you begins. Perhaps you can tell us a little about your experience learning music and singing training, and later how you and Ramin started Niyaz duo and how the project has been developed over the years for you guys.
Thank you so much. What an interesting introduction. I could listen to you. Maybe you should just talk. Thank you for preparing that so well. Well, I was born in Iran, and I grew up in an English boarding school in India since I was 4 years old. And the school that I went to, actually, there was a heavy emphasis on the arts. I originally should have been a dancer. That's really what I studied. And it's only when I moved to the United States where I first developed an interest in music. And I did not want to be a singer then. I was much more interested in being an instrumentalist. But at that time, in 1985, it was not like today where you had so many master musicians, you know, such as yourself. If you wanted to study an Iranian instrument, there were really only 1 or 2 teachers, and just there was really Ustad Manucher Sadeghi who teaches santur still after all these years, and maybe there was 1 or 2 other. And I just happened to know Dr. Sadeghi's son. We were all sort of high school friends, and I went to their house one day and I heard him play, and I thought, that's what I want to learn. It was not the passionate instrument of my soul, but I really wanted to learn an instrument. So I actually started there. I started studying with him, and I studied for 8 years. But during those studies, as you know, in Iranian classical music, there are pieces that you have to sing along. You know, there's poetry, and he would make me accompany it so I could just get the phrasing right. And when I used to sing, he used to tell me, you know, you could have a very good voice. It moves me when you sing. Have you thought about singing? And I said, no, not really. And then he was the one who originally sort of told me, I think you need to look into that. So I took a course at Santa Monica College, a singing course. And at the end of the semester, when I did, you know, your final was to perform, and I performed an aria, and the teacher asked me to stay at the end. And he said, you know, I think you could be a great singer, and I'm willing to teach you privately if you're interested. And I said, okay, I'll try it for a while. And I started studying with him. And I think once I started singing, nobody had any desire to hear me play santur anymore. So I kind of retired my santur. And then actually my formal training was in early Renaissance music. I ended up joining a choir here in Los Angeles. And that was really sort of the passion music, the music that drew me, that I was very passionate about, was the early Renaissance music. And then from there, I began to sort of work my way backwards towards my roots. And I wanted to learn about Iranian folkloric music, because that was really what it's still to this day is what interests me the most. I'm very passionate about folkloric music. My mother used to listen to a lot of folk music at home, a lot of Sima Bina. So I started sort of doing my research and going back, and then teaching myself how to sing the folk songs. And a lot of it is really by osmosis. And then when Ramin and I met when we were very young, actually, I have known him since I was 18 years old, and he started Axiom of Choice. I had a previous band, Voss, and it was in the 90s, where it was a very exciting time in Los Angeles. We all had come from different backgrounds, Iranians, but we were trying to forge a new path and a new sound in music. And we didn't even think about it as fusion at that time, because when we think of fusion, it's something so external, you know, bringing different instruments together. But what was happening to us was more from inside. So you don't think of fusion as happening within yourself, but actually that's what it was. And this needed to express itself, you know, coming from Iran and being transplanted, and the past, the present, East and West, and ancient and modern, all these became concepts that came to the forefront in our artistic expression. So then we had our own groups and we both became successful, and then we dissolved those projects, and then we decided to come together to create something, but we didn't want it to be a sound that we were repeating ourselves with our previous projects. And I always had an interest in exploring electronic music, so I suggested we try to incorporate electronic sounds. And even that took quite a process, because we at that time, the only electronic music that I was hearing was, these sort of beats, these 4 on the floor beats, and then they would slap on a ethnic instrument, and then there was no song structure, there was no soul. So we decided to come at it from the other end. So we would record everything, all the acoustic elements first, and then we would slowly try to incorporate electronic sounds and try to create this sort of blur that line where you could tell something is acoustic and then now it's transforming and becoming electronic. So really creating a hybrid sound between electronic and acoustic music. And I feel like when I listen to our first album, it's not really that mature, but it's all experimentation, and I love that it exists because it's an experimentation that we shared with our public. So that's a very long answer, and that's where we are today.
Thank you. It's very interesting because your interest in Renaissance music somehow is related to Iranian and Turkish music, because before the establishment of classical music, before 17th century, there is a direct link between those music and the music that we can find in our region. So I think unconsciously you knew what you wanted, and it's very interesting that you could blend them at some point together.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I think I will send you this album of mine. I did an album in 2002. I think it's called Portals of Grace. And I always describe that album as my sonic thesis, because I researched it for 2 years. And it is actually, that's exactly what it is. It's where I explored a lot of Sephardic music, Renaissance music, and I was exploring this connection between early European Renaissance music and Middle Eastern music. So that is, I'm very proud of that album, and I have to send that to you.
Thank you so much. Ramin Jan, I wanted to ask you the same question. Would you please...
Sure. I'll try to kind of answer quickly so that we can move on. But my journey starts on actually in Iran. I was learning Iranian traditional violin until I was 14 years old, and then because of the revolution, I came to United States. And among all places, my parents sent me to Eugene, Oregon. And of course, because I was learning Iranian music, I couldn't fit into the orchestra. And then I picked up a guitar because that seemed to be something that was more acceptable socially for where I was. And I tried to learn flamenco music. And I had an amazing teacher when I moved to LA. His name was Paco Arroyo. But no matter how hard I was working, every time I would go to his class, his reaction was, okay, great. Let's do another lesson. I was just like, oh, wait a minute. Like, you don't know how much I have worked already on this last session. And he was very, would never really give me that reaction that I wanted. So one day I asked him, so you have to be honest with me. What's wrong here? And he said, you have an accent. And you will always have that accent unless you move to Spain and be the third guitarist in the row that is just playing Resquiado until 2 a.m. in the morning. And once you're rushing, everybody's going to look at you, and you got to get drunk with them, and you got to hear the singer sing in the club and the fire that is created. Otherwise, you will be a third-rate guitarist. So I quit. And I decided to create a quarter tone guitar because I didn't want to let go of my technique. And so I created a quarter tone guitar, and that became the foundation of the sound for my first band, Axiom of Choice. I started learning Iranian traditional music from Piraye Purafar first. and just continued on learning via recordings, Carry Me recordings, everything that I could find until Alizadeh came here. Ustad Alizadeh came here for a year and a half. I studied with him and so on and so forth until we created Niyaz. And now it was the time to, after Axiom of Choice, to kind of create a new hybrid and learn how to put all that into work in the context of electronic music.
Wonderful. Thank you. So I think you both talk about this a little, but I wanted to specifically ask you, what is intersection of art and technology? Basically, what is intersection of music and technology means in your work?
Well, actually, we did create a slide here that if Alireza, you're kind enough to bring that on, we can show that, because there are three things that are very fundamental to our expression in when it comes to the intersection of art and technology. One is that the manipulation of sounds, as Azam said, during the recording and on stage. That happens a lot with Azam's voice, also instruments. Another thing that it became very clear is that I had to kind of create a new instrument that sits well within the context of our music. And I adopted the guitar viol, which is a quarter tone electronic, essentially viola da gamba. It's a 6-string instrument, but it's electronic. It has quarter tones, so I can still play our maqams and our scales on it. And then we decided to take this one level further and include digital scenography, which we are creating a digital atmosphere on stage that interacts and reacts with the motion and the sound on stage. So any visuals that we have on stage kind of interacts with what musicians do. And that was a whole new level of intersection for us. And it took us quite a while to create this multidisciplinary show, even understand what is it that we wanted to do. Even that process of self-discovery took a while.
That's very interesting. We're going to talk about this more later, but including non-Western instrument in this work you do, it's very interesting because for classical musicians, or in that framework, when they wanted to include other instrument, it's always a very big challenge, because when there is a direct composition involved, usually we loses the essence of the music and that instrument. But what is really interesting in your work that have been listening is that you somehow managed to keep the essence in your work, and this is very important, I think, task that you achieved. So maybe you can tell us a little about this, how this process worked for you guys.
Yeah, I mean, I'll answer mine and then I'll let Azam elaborate on it more, because you just made that example. And really, it came from the idea that as soon as you put a mic in front of an acoustic instrument and you start amplifying, you are already manipulating the sound. You already have incorporated the modern technology, in a sense, to do it. But the intersection of art and technology is very old. I mean, we used to build these amphitheaters to amplify the sound, or have a beautiful resonance and have the ideal reverberation. I mean, we always did it, but it was kinetic energy. And then we came to electronic time, which was more about amplification. And then instruments began to change. I mean, there are many oud players that actually play electric oud, and the guitar technology moved the guitar from being something as a background instrument to being a forward instrument, to be a solo or lead instrument. So I felt the same thing about the instrumentation that we were doing. Originally, when I would go on stage with just a regular acoustic instrument, it could not compete in the context of the compositions that we were doing. because of the bass, strong bass, and those things, that the sound was getting drowned and you could not have a good audible definition. So creating an electric instrument that I can kind of bring and manipulate on stage was very kind of important, even into our compositions. Now I'm going to let you, Azam, add, please, to the...
I think, you know, for some reason, I don't know, when you asked this question, I remember the very first time that I went in to record into a studio, and I was so frustrated because as soon as I got under the headphones and started singing into the mic, I didn't recognize my voice. And I didn't know, now I've become a good engineer and producer. I've studied over the years, but in the beginning, when I didn't know anything about technology or recording, I remember I used to get so frustrated with the engineer because I used to keep taking my headphone off and saying, I don't like the sound. And then they would ask me, what's the issue? Just try to explain it and I'll try to find the right sound for you. And my answer was always the same. I just wanted to sound like my voice. I would take off the headphone and I would say, listen to that tone. And then I can't hear that tone when I'm singing in the mic under headphones. So my frustration with technology and also wanting to learn technology, I think began there, with my frustration of how the moment you place a microphone in front of an acoustic instrument, it changes its nature. So I developed my interest there in terms of, okay, if I'm going to change the nature of an acoustic instrument, then that means there has to be a new expression there. It's not black or white, acoustic or electronic. There has to be a place to go from here. And I just started to dive deeper and deeper into how much this acoustic sound can be manipulated. And I can say that for me today, I have a very specific approach when I'm recording vocals, let's say, or if I go into a church and there's beautiful amplification and I'm going to sing something a cappella, I would sing very differently in that environment as opposed to if I'm recording in the studio, because it's a completely different approach. And it's the same, you are a master percussionist, and I humbly play frame drum, and it's the same thing. People always ask me, how do you get that sound on your frame drum? And it's exactly that same approach also that I apply to anything acoustic that I'm recording. It's a very simple answer, but it's I think that's my, it's really keeping. And in terms of Niyaz, I would say where we preserve the essence. If you asked me, what is the essence you're trying to preserve? For me, that essence would be really the crafting of song, the craftsmanship of songwriting. There is a huge, still an emphasis on writing a song, because a lot of times we associate electronic music with just sort of mindless beats and just kind of random events that are occurring, in the sonic realm. But here, song structure is extremely important to us. Our solos, our melodies are really thought out. The lyrics have to have meaning. And I think that essence, that is where the soul of the song really lives.
Right. Right. When I was listening, I noticed all the work you guys are doing. It's very personal. That means it is original because it's personal. And to find that voice, to find that signature is a process. It's not easy that you can achieve in one night, I'm sure. And for you especially, Azam, that because your instrument is your voice. So doing all this manipulation with the sound and your voice, it's sometimes it can be challenging because you had different style of training, and suddenly you have to put yourself in different position. Maybe you can tell us a little about that process. How was that for you? This journey of as a singer that you had a different style of training and suddenly put yourself in that framework?
I had this amazing, my second vocal teacher she's still here. She gave me the best advice. She was the leader of the Renaissance Jouissance. Actually, it's a French choir here in Los Angeles. When I joined Jouissance, she was my training coach, and she used to make me sing these arias and these, and one day I was frustrated in the class, and I said, I don't know why you're making me sing this music. I'm not passionate about this music. And she said to me, the reason I'm making you sing these is because this is where your voice is going to really mature. And once you learn how to use your voice properly, you can sing whatever you want to sing. But if you don't learn how to use your instrument well, by the time you hit 45, you're not going to have a voice anymore. You're going to destroy your vocal cords. So I'm teaching you how to use your vocal cords properly. And that advice always stayed with me. And I never questioned her choice of material after that, whatever she taught. And now all these years later, I see that she was right. I can really adapt my voice to, because I have so much interest, also Indian classical singing. I pursued a little bit of that. And then I seriously also studied Bulgarian folkloric singing, which is a completely different style, with one of the master singers here who was teaching also at UCLA, Tsvetanka Verimezova. She's one of the top singers in Bulgaria. And I studied privately with her for a while because I had developed such a strong head voice doing early music, and I had no chest voice. And I knew that if I wanted to begin recording, I needed to have a chest voice. And it took me so long to develop that chest voice. And I developed it really studying Bulgarian music. And I remember when I first started singing chest voice, I could maybe sing maximum 15, 20 minutes, and then I would feel hoarse because I didn't know how to use those muscles. So once I learned how to use my chest voice, and then I had studied enough with the head voice, then it became very easy for me to sort of adapt to different styles. And, when I open a recording session, we have these templates that we have created for recording so that it makes the process faster. And in those templates, both Ramin has his sort of, I don't want to get into very much geek recording, but different settings. So I have all different kind of settings in terms of the reverb, delay, frequency, all of these things that we've created several different settings. And when I go into a session and I know what kind of song, let's say I'm going to record an Iranian folk song, I know which setting I'm going to use. If I'm going to do an early music piece where it's more semi-operatic, then I have a completely different setting for that. So it's taken many years to develop. It's a lot of sort of sitting together, and thanks to Ramin's help, we sit and I sing, and then we find the right sound, the right frequencies to make it sound as pure and as close to the natural sound of that I'm going to be utilizing. And then we create those settings based on that. So in the beginning, it was extremely challenging for me because I hated the way my vocals sound. For most of my records that I can't listen to, because for exactly this reason, I never liked the sound of my voice, the way it was captured. So it's still a process because the voice is also changing. It's not like other instruments, it's not static, and I gain weight, I lose weight, I get older, and so all of this changes the quality of the voice. So I hope that I answered your question.
Thank you. Maybe now we can, one of the greatest things about your work and musician like you is that your work, there is so many layers of meaning there for sure, but also it's accessible to people. That means you have a large audience following you and they wanted to listen to you, not just coming to your concert, even if they're in their car or they're working in the kitchen, they listen to your work. And this is, I call it, accessible for them. So maybe Ramin, you can share your thoughts a little about the basically cultural impact in your work, you know, appreciation, appropriation.
Yeah, I can touch on that and then we can elaborate on it. You know, I still belong to a generation that it used to be customary when we were young that you would get a new recording or vinyl, you bring it home with your friends, you put a headphone or just you blast it on your speakers, and the musical experience alone was sufficient to engage the audience. I think our society has changed and there has been a definite divergence in between the way that we consume musically or we listen to music passively or actively. Most of the time now at home or outside of the concert platform, people listen to music passively. They're having dinner, they're in their cars, as you said, they're working, and therefore they have the music being played, which means that it changed the nature of the way that people create music as well. Because if you have very pronounced, complex solo, it quickly gets kind of lowered in the mix. People naturally go reach for the volume knob and bring it down. The dynamics became less in recording music because music became something that had to be incorporated into other natural surrounding sound. And on its own, you could not create that kind of a dynamics. On stage, it's quite the other way around. You are the focus. You have to have solos. You have to have a huge dynamic range in order to continue to keep the audience engaged. Now, a lot of this is a reflection of the way we live. It comes to our living experiences. And what's common is that, yeah, Azam and I have lived outside of Iran for most of our lives. So naturally, a lot of the components that we apply to our music, if it's audio recording, it is knowing that how the lifestyle here works, knowing that we have assimilated, and to a great extent, our music is assimilated. Yeah. Now, what does the assimilation mean? I'm gonna, if you want, you can touch on that, and then we can elaborate more.
No, I think that's such an important point that he brought up, that our music is assimilated music. And yeah, I know we give lectures on cultural appropriation and how to do it responsibly, but you know, that also applies to Niyaz's music. Our music is extremely appropriated music. You know, I know Ramin, it's a subject he's very passionate about, and so I won't hijack that conversation. But you know, within Iran, we have so many different ethnicities and minority ethnic groups, religious groups, and all of them have their own music. And you know, every time we perform the folkloric music of Iran, we are appropriating someone else's music to a certain extent. So how do we do that responsibly? And also our music being so assimilated, I think in terms of its accessibility, my answer would be a bit more esoteric than that, because I think the most accessible art is art that is autobiographical. I think when you tell your own story in some way, when you are honest in your work about your own experiences, and those can be dark experiences, painful experiences. You know, for a lot of people, they find our music to be a bit somber, but it's, you know, it's the story of our lives. It's we've lived painful, all Iranians, all immigrants have come from so much pain. You know, I find Persian classical music to be very heavy music. It's very painful music, you know, it has so much history. And, you know, the goal of us as musicians, I always feel, is to be able to transform. That is our goal, is transformation. How to take your pain and your life experiences, infuse that into your work, and bring it to a point of illumination where the pain is still there, but you pull people out of it and you give them a release. And I think that it's exactly like Maulana's poetry. Why did it become a worldwide phenomenon? Because it speaks directly to the human spirit. It goes directly to the heart. It unlocks something very ancient within all of us. And I like to think, our music, not to compare ourselves to the greats, but I think just for the sole fact that it's honest and it tells the story of being an immigrant, coming from an ancient culture, but then also modernizing, becoming part of the modern world, listening to Western music, listening to electronic music, and then bringing those expressions into our work. It also creates a new language with which we can communicate with non-Iranian audiences. We are speaking their language, whether they realize it or not,
Right, because it's already diverse. Any Iranian, I think this is something that sometimes we don't even pay attention to it, because we have been organically practicing and living that way. That Iran, surprisingly enough, is a very diverse country. We have, as you have just mentioned, we have so many different group living in Iran, coexist for 1,000 years next to another, and they never question who the other groups are or what kind of religion they have. And as I say, this is not like a political force or anything like that. It was organically, this has been practiced for so many years. And in music, I know for a fact that in Tehran, for example, any middle class family who has, party or wedding, I remember, they always have a, Kurdish music. They always have they dance. They don't know how to dance Kurdish music, but they try it, and it's part of their, celebration. They have, I remember my father, we are not from Tabriz or that part of the Iran, but when he was listening to Azeri music, I could see he was a military man, but he almost was crying several times because the emotion involved with him. So somehow we organically practice this and live with this. And I think you guys are doing in your music, you're practicing in your music, but you go even further with this because you incorporate other music in your work. Maybe Ramin.
Yeah, actually, you mentioned some, before we go on, I want to kind of bring this up because we have a negative connotation about the word appropriation and assimilation. We always think of these two as something negative. But first of all, they are inevitable. As you said, it's always there when two cultures kind of interact. It's going to have one of those two power dynamic that either it's going to force the other one to assimilate or it's going to appropriate. But the thing is that if it's done responsibly and consciously, then it's a positive thing. It's because it is something that it happens to cultures. For example, right now of course we play in part of the Niyaz repertoire, we play a lot of music from the Bektashi tradition in Turkey. So whenever we do that, there is a lot of, first of all, research that goes into it. We always make sure we have a Turkish musician involved in the process so that we are kind of incorporating their expression directly into the song. Azam takes an immense amount of time to make sure all the pronunciation is done correctly. And then we always give credit and try to give back something to the community as well. If those things are done, then appropriation, in our humble opinion, is done in a healthy way. It only goes wrong when you take things out of context just for your own personal use and your personal advancement without due credit. And that happens also. And then it creates a lot of tension.
Yeah, I mean, a good example of that is, recently the wonderful Nowruz concert with the Pacific Symphony. You attended that concert, and I was going to sing one of Ostad Ahmad Pejman's pieces, Gul Pamchal, which is a Gilaki folk song. So when you're looking at, with all the diverse ethnicities in Iran, the dialects are so different that it's almost a different language. That I actually did a post on Facebook and I asked if there were any Iranian Gilakis who could help me with the pronunciation. And I was really grateful that I got to work with a singer. And that becomes very important for me, is when you are going to appropriate something of an ethnic group particularly a minority group, it's so important to represent it correctly. It bothers me when I hear, you know, sometimes very well-known singers, they'll take a folkloric melody of another group and a little bit of the words, and then they just kind of sing it. And I feel that you do such an injustice to that particular group because it matters to them, their culture matters to them. And I wanted, even if there's going to be one person, Gilaki person in that concert, that they would feel like, I'm so proud she sang it perfectly the way we would sing it. So that becomes very important for me as well, in terms of, because we do so many, you know, as Ramin said, you know, the Alevi Bektashi tradition in Turkey is the same, and I don't speak Turkish, so I always have to work very closely with someone on the pronunciation, even the melodies, all of those things, you know, that becomes very important for us.
Great. Ali Reza, would you please share the video that I think it was Niyaz's concert in France. Maybe after that we can continue our discussion. Beautiful, beautiful. I love this. Maybe this is a good time to talk about this actually a little. You touched this a little at the beginning, but I wanted to ask you more on details, how every component that exists in this video, we have lighting, we have video, art, and the text, music, how are related to each other? I mean, you can come up with any video or any lighting and no one can notice, you know, what are their connection. But I wanted to ask you as a composer, how you can actually connect these elements and component together.
In terms of visually or just the show itself? Because there are two different questions.
You know, visual, I'm sure they're all, you know, related somehow, because even visually and the music itself, they're, you know, related. Or
yeah, so we decided to do our last album on Rabia Al-Basri, or Rabe Adviye, who was one of the first female Sufi, and is considered as like the mother of the modern Sufism as we know it. And the show itself is also based on her, loosely is inspired by the story of her life. So there are four sections that we're going to go through, and each one kind of symbolizes an aspect or a period of her life. And the compositions were kind of done with that story in mind to start with. And then we created the visuals and the dance component for the show as we went along to kind of fit into that narrative. Azam, if you want to add something to it, because I might.
No, I think the only thing that I would add is, you know, before we decided to create this project, we had just moved to Montreal, and Quebec in particular, they subsidize a lot of money into technology and, you know, the visual arts. And for us, the dance world has always been the most progressive in terms of embracing technology and experimentation. So at that point, when we moved to Montreal, we were seeing a lot of these shows that were utilizing this kind of technology, interactive technology. And we kept seeing the same artist's work that we loved, and we just called him and decided it's so small, Montreal. We decided to have coffee with him. He's a French visual artist, Jérôme de la Pierre. And we ended up meeting for coffee, and we said, can you create that, but for a live music experience? He said, I've never done that. It's only for dance. What a great challenge. Let's do it. So at that point, when we had moved to Montreal, our goal was we sat and we thought, okay, we've done records, we've toured the world. What do we want to do now? You know, what's the next step? And I think our interest from that moment has just continued down this path of what you see in this final product is really sort of bringing together the different mediums of art. So you have music, you have dance, you have visuals, you have all kinds of these different art forms that are seamlessly coming together. And this kind of unifying experience is very much what interests us, is how can we enhance this even more and more and more? Because at that point, once we had become successful, most electronic bands, they would perform and then they had some visuals happening in the background. And we just found that so boring and, you know, redundant, because as soon as you put visuals that have no meaning, it's the human eye. It's like if you go to a house party and someone turns on the television, everyone will look at the TV. They will not even look at each other anymore. It's the natural gaze of the human beings is towards the visual. So we thought, okay, we have to be able to utilize this in a way that you're not sacrificing the music or the dance, that it all becomes one experience. So that particular concert in France was interesting, because when we he brought us there for a week residency. And instead of just using one projector, he said, I want you to transform the space. So Jérôme ended up using 6 projectors for the sides, for the back, and for the front. So when you went into that space, it was just, you were completely enveloped in this experience, you know. And what was really magical, it's an old monastery cathedral, and he was projecting these, you know, Islamic geometric patterns, and suddenly you went from this church to suddenly being inside this mosque, to suddenly, you know, even the space was completely, I mean, you know, I still get chills when I think about it. And this is really where our core interest of, I think, Niyaz today lies, is exactly for us. When you ask what is the intersection of art and technology for you, it's where we can adapt technology to enhance a musical experience, a dance experience, a visual experience, to where all of these different mediums are in, you know, blurred. The line between those boundaries is blurred, and you have this unique transformative experience.
An alternate to create a stronger transformative experience for the audience. I mean, it's all at the end, it's about creating that transformation.
Exactly. And I have to add also your personal voice to this process, which is very important. And this is something that I wanted to ask you guys before we go for Q&A, that we, you know, there are so many young artists, they are in this journey right now. And usually when I have a student, the only advice I give them before I teach them any compositional technique or anything, I always ask them to find their voice, to be original. So now I wanted to ask you, what kind of insight and advice you have for those young artists to achieve this goal, basically?
To find your own voice,
to be original, to find your, because, you know, these things, it's very accessible these days, you know, putting all this together, it's something that a lot of 16 years old kid at home, they can do this. But the only problem is that they cannot find their voice to be original.
Well, we have a 15-year-old cellist at home that constantly asks that question. He plays a melody and he says, wait a minute, I already have heard that melody in such a film. And he plays another melody of his own and says, wait a minute, that came from Schubert. So he constantly is struggling to find his voice. And I tell him there is only one way to find it. Through your personal living experience. You can make a story, you can make a film about any human being on earth. And if they are honest and you go truly into it, it's fascinating and it's very different than another person. So as long as you're reflecting your own personal experience and your emotion into that music, naturally, everything else just becomes a tool. Studying composition, in my humble opinion, is nothing but studying someone else's way of solving a problem, a theoretical problem, trying to express themselves. So it's use everything else as a tool to tell your story.
Right.
Yeah, I can only answer that question by telling my own personal experience. And, I personally don't believe that there is anything original anymore. I think everything has been done, everything has been said. When people ask me, how did you find your own voice? I don't think it was ever something conscious, but the process was very clear for me. I tell people, learn music that really moves you to your core, that shakes you to your core. I mean, the first time I heard the voice of Hildegard, the musical compositions of Hildegard von Bingen, the medieval composer and mystic, I was listening to the Gothic Voices Choir from, it was just being broadcast on the radio. And when the main vocalist came on, Emily Van Evera, I will never forget the way her voice made me feel. All the hair on my body stood up. And I immediately rushed to the record. I called the radio station. I said, what is this album you're playing? I rushed to the record store. I brought it home. And the lyrics were in the booklet, the good old days. And I taught myself how to sing that particular piece that had moved my soul. And I think that's how I've discovered my own voice, is by emulating music that moved me so much, and then trying to create compositions that first moved me the same way that music was moving me. And personally, I think today the most interesting music that is being made is in soundtrack music, because that's where the lines between classical music and modern music are really getting blurred. A lot of experimentation is happening. And soundtrack music has always played a big role in my life. And I remember when the movie Passion of the Christ came out, Peter Gabriel's score. That score, I think, is a turning point for many musicians like myself who were interested in sort of breaking boundaries. I'll never forget sitting in that film. I have no idea what happened in that film or the dialogue, because I just was lost in the soundtrack. And I came out of that movie and I said, I want to make music that is going to make me feel like that. It was not even about other people. I wanted to feel that way with my own compositions. And I think that's really the best way. Emulate those you love the most. And when they move you, then try to find that feeling in your own work. And you can only do that if you're being honest. You just have to be very honest in your work.
Absolutely. Well, this was a beautiful closure. And now we can move on to Q&A. I'm sure many of the listeners, they are very much looking forward to your concert in August. And I myself cannot wait to listen to your music more and more. And you can perhaps educate me more about your work. I really enjoyed this conversation and discussion with you too. So Alireza, would you please start the Q&A, please? Thank you.
Thank you so much to all of you. As a non-musician, I have to say, just Listening to you all talk about your process and your creative process is really fascinating, and I learned so much. We have lots of questions, so let's get to as many as we can. The first one is from Fred Parvaneh. Thank you for joining us, Fred.
Hi, Fred.
For Azam and Loga, as musicians, how do you keep up with the constantly evolving technology, and how has technology influenced your music over the years?
Well, I think we touched on a lot of that already, but keeping up with the technology is tough. I mean, every 6 months a new upgrade comes, and it's just no different than trying to keep up with the upgrade on your phone. It's just like constantly you have to be engaged. Constantly this happens and that happens. Now, like, for example, being a little bit more technical, like even on Spotify, if you go, you can have a Atmos mix, which is something totally new. I mean, having 7.1 mixes available on a streaming is new, and therefore it does require us now to start learning that and kind of adapt our music so that we can have a version of that as well. So it's a constant work. It's not easy. It's tough.
Yeah, it's like a language, because for example, for our Fourth Light show, we are 9, it's a 9 people crew, and there's so much technology on stage, whether it's for the music end or the visual end. And if you don't have the latest, everybody has to be make sure we're all speaking the same language, because if there's a technical issue, you have to be able to communicate that with one another. And if you don't have that latest version, it's not going to be compatible with. So it's a constant. We're just constantly learning, and now we're beginning to feel old because it gets harder and harder to keep up.
Yeah.
Well, you're doing a great job at it. The next question is for Morteza Golpur. What does the panel think about the application of AI, specifically with the kind of work you're doing and related to younger musicians and artists' creativity and originality?
Mm-hmm. I think right now when a new technology comes, the best way to look at its impact is to see when the last wave happened, what was the impact. Because when the recording technology came about, it really changed the way we experience music. Before then, you had to have a musician either in the family or a friend that actually could play the music in order to experience the music for common people. Then, of course, in the court, you had the privilege of hiring musicians, but for the regular people, somebody had to play it in order for you to experience it. So when that came, of course, I'm sure a lot of musicians thought they're going to be unemployed. Oh my God, my value in the society is going to diminish because now a machine is playing back music. Machine is playing back music. But what did it do? Musicians adapt, artists adapt, and it became yet another tool. So I think AI right now, we have a fear about it. I do have a fear about it. But I think once it really becomes a reality of our daily life, we adapt to it, and we'll learn how to use it in ways that we cannot even envision today.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's, I don't know how much it's going to impact us, because we are sort of in the, I don't, hopefully we have many more years of expressing ourselves as musicians, but, we have lived a big part of already a great life, and we've done so much. So the twilight years of our careers are closer to us than, the glory days. But I'm curious to see, actually, for my son's generation, he's 15, he's very passionate about music. I think it's a reality that they're going to be very much faced with. And I'm looking forward to learning through his generation how they embrace AI and utilize it, because it's going to be a tool, and like every other tool, it has positive and negative implications. And as Ramin said, when technology first entered even acoustic music, I remember many years ago, there's I won't name him, but a very prominent classical musician said that he never uses, even though he goes on stage, he'll never put reverb on his microphone. And I remember at that time thinking, then why even put the microphone? Because already you've changed the nature of your instrument. And now I see his performances and they're beautiful, and he has incorporated so much more technology into his work. So there is always that initial fear, and then people learn to sort of adapt and use it, hopefully for the positive, you know.
The next couple of questions are from fellow musicians. One says, Azam, I am such a huge fan and would like to express how much I appreciate your music. My question for you is, how do you constantly convey such strong passion and emotion during your performances, effectively synchronizing them with the music and connecting them with the audience?
Well, I'm very flattered that this person feels that way, because, you know, it's not something very conscious. I think when I go on stage, it's kind of, you know, you put on, you kind of go somewhere else. And I just try to keep it real, you know, just really be there in that moment with those people I am sharing that space with, and to just pour my heart and soul into every note that I'm going to sing, and to really be there with the musicians that I'm on stage with. It's such a democracy, our group. We really become like one body. So if there's anything wonderful that I am emoting, it is 100% in response to the amazing musicians who I am sharing that stage with. You know, I always say I can be a beautiful flower because I'm in a wonderful garden.
That's great. Another one is from Haritan Louizu. Sorry if I
yes, my Greek friend. Hello.
Oh.
I met him in London. Yes, hello.
Thank you so much for this workshop. I really agree that accessibility is really brought to people when you're authentic and honest to them, and first of all, to yourself. I'm giving a concert along with my boyfriend about Sephardic music, and it's been 3 years already since I last partook in the concert. I would therefore like to get a few directions on how I can adjust my voice so that I do not come across the same kind of frustration as I'm experienced when she was first recording. That's a long question.
So is it more of a technical question of how he should record? I think a lot of experimentation, because every voice is different. So even if I gave you the perfect settings for my voice, it would not work for your voice. So you have to really spend a lot of time. The thing is, people become very impatient when they go into a studio. They have an idea and they're passionate and they just want to immediately record and keep going. But you really should dedicate, my advice would be dedicate one day that you're not doing any musical recording. You're just going in there to work on sound. You're going to sing in different, first you have to find which spot in the room your voice, every time you move the microphone and move where you stand, it's going to change the nature of the tone. So you have to move around and find the right, I have a very particular spot in my studio where I like to stand and record my vocals. So just experiment and be very patient. Tell yourself you're not recording any vocals that day. You're just going to work on sound. Find the right sound, play with different frequencies, take your time, take your headphones off, listen to your actual voice, put it back on. And then the closer you come to the actual sound that it's pleasing to you, that it really feels like that's your voice, that's what's resonating from within you, then that's what the settings you should fix. And then from that point on, that's how you should record your vocals.
Great advice. Our next one is for Dr. Paranj. Congratulations on your new position at UCLA. We are also proud of the Iranian music program. How do you see the future of this music program and how it will impact students in the future?
Well, thank you. This is a different subject, but of course, I will answer. Well, when I started this position, first of all, this is a very important and great thing that happened for Iranian music. And thanks to Farhang Foundation, they initiated and started this with UCLA. They did the most important job already. And it's been already there for a few years, but my mission is to make sure to bring most powerful and excerpt in this program, so it can go to the direction that it deserves. And I'm so happy that I already talked to many people that they are really, willing to join us to this program and do a lot of things which will be great things for the community that we have in Los Angeles, but furthermore for Iranian music, and hopefully one day we can have a direct connection with Iran so we can do a lot of great things together there.
And on behalf of Farhang, I have to thank you for your leadership, and we're all very excited for what you're bringing to the program, and the future is very bright. Let's end on this. We're running out of time, so we're going to do one more question. I think we can end on this question from Patty Saw. As musicians who are so diverse and are influenced by such diverse elements, what inspires you to make new music? Is it always the same path, or is each piece of music inspired differently?
I would say that the need to create music is just there, and for me, it's a lot of times I find my sanity when I am creating music, and therefore I need to create music. Otherwise, I will go insane. So it's trying to find a place, as Azam said, that I feel emotionally connected, and it is like going home. Like going somewhere that I can be myself, I can be by myself, I can enjoy myself. So in that process, that's common among all the style of music that we do. Now, of course, music has an application. So if we are working on a film, that's a very different place. That's a very different process of creation. If we are working on a song for Niyaz, that's a different process. But in essence, the creativity is where you want to go to because it changes you.
Yeah, I think the only thing I would add to that is the projects that excite me the most are projects in which I'm going to go through an educational process. I have to do research and in the process learn. And so from that perspective, literature becomes very important because now you're dealing with poetry and then the figures. So like for Rabia al-Basri, for The Fourth Light, it was such a educational journey, learning about her and trying to find her poetry and, reaching out to people all over the globe to see if they could find this, find that, because it was so hard to find anything about her. And that becomes very exciting. So it's almost like a archaeological process, when you become a musician and you're interested in history and the past, like us. It's a educational process for us. But, in terms of a personal experience, I remember when I was younger and I used to tell people if I don't do music, I would die. And they would think I'm being melodramatic, but it's the truth. It really is the truth. Sometimes if I don't have a chance because I'm busy and I can't come to the studio for 4 or 5 days, Ramin will tell me, he'll say, you're not doing well. You need to just drop everything and just go up there and lose yourself for a few hours. And then I come up here and I work and I feel like a different person. So I think it's a combination of those things. Is we do it first for selfish reasons to save ourselves because it's therapeutic. And second, it's a learning process. I would be very bored if I just came and did the same thing, but I was not learning something new in the process.
Wonderful. Well, we end on that note, and I want to thank you so much, Azam, Ramin, and Shahab, John, for this very thought-provoking and insightful conversation. Of course, we are all awaiting with anticipation to see Niyaz's The Fourth Light experience, which will be premiering at Royce Hall on August 19th. For those of you who are looking to join us in person for this live multimedia immersive experience, you may secure your tickets now by visiting farhang.org. Definitely do not miss it, as this is the final performance anywhere in the world. We welcome you to visit our website for all the latest news, updates on all of Farhang Foundation's programs and initiatives, including our latest events, concerts, talks, and exhibitions. We thank you all for joining us from all corners of the globe to attend today's talk. And once again, I thank Azam, Ramin, and Shahab for taking the time out of their extremely busy schedules to be with us today. For now, I bid you all farewell, and until next time, bedurud. Great to see you all.
Can I say thank you as well?
Yes, please go.
I really want to thank you, Alireza John, for all your efforts, which I don't know where you get your energy from, but somehow you always manage to be at 100% for all that you do for our community. I'm so grateful to you. And Shahab John, you are such a busy man. You're running an entire festival right now in France, and it's late for you. And I cannot thank you enough for taking this time to prepare and to have this conversation with us. I'm so excited for all that you are going to be doing for the music and arts community here in Los Angeles and beyond. And we are so excited to welcome you to be amongst us, and we all look forward to learning from you. And thank you both so much for everything. Thank you.
Thank you, and we'll see everyone on August 19th at Royce Hall. Have a great day.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.